I used to think family was unbreakable, a chain of love and blood that could withstand anything. But that was before I learned how quickly love turns to greed when money is involved. The first sign came quietly. Like a slow leak in a pipe you don't notice until the floor is flooded. My father's health had been failing for months. I spent every free hour visiting him, reading to him when he was too weak to speak, holding his hand while he drifted in and out of sleep. My mother had died years ago, and Dad had been my anchor ever since. I thought my siblings, Clara and James, shared that love, but I was wrong in the beginning. They called me, asked about his condition, sent flowers, but soon the calls became less frequent, and the flowers stopped. Clara always claimed she was too busy with work, while James made excuses about being out of town. I didn't think much of it until I overheard Clara whispering in the hallway to our father's lawyer one afternoon, her voice low and urgent. I paused, hidden behind the kitchen door, straining to hear. "We just want to make sure things are fair," she said. "Do you know, for the family?" The word fair burned into my mind like a brand. I'd heard it before years ago, during smaller disputes over property, jewelry, and even a set of china plates. In my family, fair never meant equal. It meant whatever benefits us the most. When Dad passed away a few weeks later, I was numb with grief. But before I could even process his absence, my siblings began to act strangely around me. At the wake, they avoided my eyes. James kept checking his phone. Clara barely spoke. When she did, her tone was clipped, like she was speaking to a stranger. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Monday at my father's lawyer's office. I arrived early, still in a haze of mourning, expecting that we would sit together and hear his final words with respect. Instead, I walked in to find Clara and James already seated on the opposite side of the room from the empty chair clearly meant for me. I sat down anyway, clutching the coffee I'd picked up on the way, trying to ignore the icy tension. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, began reading in his steady, deliberate voice. At first, everything sounded normal. Small bequests to distant relatives, donations to charities Dad had supported, instructions for the care of his house. Then came the part about the estate's main assets, properties, investments, counts. To my daughter Clara and my son James. Mr. Henderson read, "I leave the sum of," I froze. My name hadn't been mentioned. He went on, distributing item after item to them as if I didn't exist. By the time he finished, my hands were trembling. "Excuse me," I said, my voice breaking. "What about me?" Clara's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Dad didn't think you needed anything," she said softly, almost pitying. "It's fair." The lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling papers. "That concludes the reading," he said, without meeting my eyes. Clara and James stood, gathering their things. Neither of them looked back at me. I left the office in a fog, my ears ringing. I couldn't understand. Dad had always been proud of me, always said I was the responsible one. Why would he leave me nothing? It didn't make sense. Over the next few days, I replayed every conversation I'd had with him in those final months. I thought about the nights I stayed by his bedside, the mornings I brought him breakfast, the laughter we'd shared even when he was weak. None of it aligned with the cold erasure I'd just experienced. Then, a week later, I got a letter. It was from Mr. Henderson, a private addendum to the will, he called it. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper in my father's handwriting, and a set of instructions that would change everything. The letter was dated only 3 days before my father's death. The ink was still bold, the handwriting uneven but unmistakably. His. My dear child, it began. By the time you read this, the family will have shown their true faces. Do not be shocked. I have seen greed grow in them for years. This is why I have arranged things differently from what they expect. My heart pounded as I read on. He explained that the official will read to everyone was only a public version, a decoy. He knew that if Clara and James suspected he had left me the bulk of the estate, they would try to manipulate him or contest it. The real inheritance. Everything of value is already in your name, the letter said. But there are conditions. The documents and keys are hidden in the old writing desk in my study. Look under the false bottom in the left drawer. Do not trust anyone, not even the lawyer, until you have them in your hands. I stared at the letter, my hands trembling. A part of me wanted to rush to the house immediately, but another part, the one that remembered Clara's smug face at the reading, wanted to savor the moment. They thought they had one, they would let their guard down. Still, the thought of that desk gnawed at me all night. By morning, I could barely sit still. I drove to my father's house, the place where I'd grown up, now eerily silent without him. The air inside was stale, carrying the faint scent of his cologne. The study looked exactly as it had the last time I saw it. Books neatly arranged, framed photographs on the wall, the heavy oak desk in the corner. I ran my hand over its surface. Remembering the times I'd sat there doing homework while Dad worked on his ledgers, I pulled out the left drawer. Empty, except for a few pens and paper clips. Then I felt along the bottom. My fingers found the edge of a thin wooden panel. With a little pressure, it popped up, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a thick manila envelope. My breath caught. I pulled it out, heart hammering, and tore it open. Deeds, bank statements, share certificates. And at the very bottom, a single gold key. There was also another letter. Shorter this time, the key is for the safety deposit box at Green Hill Bank. Everything else you need to secure your future is there. Go quietly. Do not let Clara or James know you have this. I sat back in the chair, clutching the papers to my chest. The magnitude of it hit me all at once. The house, the investments, the accounts. It was mine. All of it. And they had no idea. But then I heard something. Floorboard creaking in the hallway. I froze. Slowly, I turned toward the doorway. And there she was. Clara, her eyes locked on the envelope in my hands. "What's that?" she asked, her voice sharp. My mind raced. "Just old papers," I said quickly, slipping the documents back into the drawer. She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "You're lying." I stood, forcing a smile. "I think you should go." She stared at me for a long moment, then smirked, the same smirk she'd worn at the reading of the will. "Fine, but just remember, I always find out the truth." She turned and walked away, but my pulse didn't slow. If she had even the slightest suspicion, she would dig until she found something. And James was even worse when it came to manipulation. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment she appeared in the doorway. Had she seen the key? Had she guessed what was in the envelope? I decided I couldn't wait. The next morning, I went to Green Hill Bank. The teller led me to a small private room and brought in the safety deposit box. I unlocked it with the gold key and lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of documents thicker than any I'd seen before, along with a sealed envelope marked simply "For the day they come for you." I didn't open it. Not yet. But I knew one thing. The war had already started. From that day on, the house felt different. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was loaded, like the air before a storm. I started noticing little things out of place. The desk drawers not quite as I'd left them. The faint smell of my sister's perfume in the hallway. A window I was sure I had locked now, standing ajar. Clara and James began calling more often, pretending to check on me. Their voices were dripping with false concern. "How are you holding up?" James would say, then casually slip in a question about whether I'd been to the bank. Clara, on the other hand, would ask about the house, almost as if she were cataloging what she thought might one day be hers. I gave them nothing. Every answer was vague, every conversation short. But I could feel the tension building. They knew something was off. Then one evening, as I was going through my father's old files, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a copy of the public will, the one read at the office. Only this one had notes scribbled in the margins in my father's handwriting. Next to every bequest to Clara and James, he had written a single word, temporary. Underneath, in smaller letters, it said, true distribution. Private it confirmed everything, and if I found it, they could too. I burned the document that night in the fireplace, watching the edges curl into ash dot, but my precautions weren't enough. The next morning, I woke to find the front door unlocked. I was sure I'd locked it before going to bed. I rushed to the study, and the envelope in the desk was gone. Panic surged through me. But then I remembered I had already moved the most important documents to the bank. The envelope they took was only a decoy I'd planted full of worthless papers. I decided to set a trap. If they were going to try to steal from me, I would let them think they had succeeded, and then I would destroy them. I replaced the decoy envelope with something more sinister. Copies of bank statements from fake accounts showing millions in hidden funds under an alias. I wanted to see how far they would go once they thought they'd uncovered my secret. Sure enough, 2 days later, James called. His voice was smooth, almost cheerful. Hey sis, we should talk, about Dad's estate. I could practically hear the greed in his voice. I agreed to meet him at a cafe downtown. I arrived. He was already there, sipping an espresso like he owned the place. Look, he said, leaning in, we both know Clara can be difficult, but I think you and I could come to an arrangement. Maybe split what you found, 50-50? I pretended to be shocked. What are you talking about? His smile widened. Come on, you think I don't know about the accounts? The ones in the name H. Morris. Bingo! They'd taken the bait. I leaned back, crossing my arms. And what if I said I wasn't interested? His expression darkened. Then Clara and I might have to make things. It's complicated for you. I left the cafe without another word. The game was in motion now, and I had no intention of losing. What they didn't know was that Dad's real secret was still untouched, and it was worth more than everything else combined.